All right. So we're going to get started. Welcome, Natalie. Do you want to take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Natalie Green. I am a student at SPS in our Youth Studies bachelor's program.
Thank you. And I am Dr. Whitney Hollins. I am an instructor in the Youth Studies department, and Natalie is one of my students. So we're going to get started with a few questions that Natalie was kind enough to create, and I will do my best to answer them in a succinct fashion.
You got this. So, tell us about the development of the Youth Studies Disability course and how you implemented the theoretical discrete framework within the 15 weeks that we have.
Yeah, so this was really sort of this intersection of all of these different experiences that I had. I taught special education in New York for over a decade. And then when I was doing my doctorate, one of my favorite professors and was on my committee was the head of the special education department at Hunter and introduced me to this idea of discrete. And it was really, it seems so simple in its concept in some ways, but it really changed the way that I view things. This idea of counter narratives and storytelling and pushing back against, these things that we have been told and reframing and lived experience and hearing from people. So when I started working at CUNY SPS in the Youth Studies department, we had a conversation about this intersection of youth and disability, right? And someone had reached out to me about creating a training for out of school time professionals about disability. And it's then that I started to realize that not only was I a youth worker as a teacher, even though I didn't always frame it like that, but that as a teacher, I felt like I was under resourced. I didn't have all the trainings that I needed on this subject. And it took me years and years and years to get to this space where I felt comfortable. And again, I'm still always learning. But that out of school time professionals really didn't have that at all. They didn't have an IEP to work from. They didn't have these trainings on disability or differentiation or scaffolding or UDL or whatever. So the idea for the course really came from the idea of what should we know? What we want youth workers to know about working with youth with disability. And overall, the approach is that we are a strength-based approach that we can create certain types of cultures and environments that are conducive to all learners having the best outcomes that they possibly can. Because one of the things that came up is that youth workers simply don't always know which youth that they're working with that have a disability, but there are certain things that we could put in place that would benefit not only youth with disability, but all learners that they engage with.
Right. Thank you. So, in the context of universal design for learning, UDL, how can these out of school time staff or youth workers empower young people with disabilities to become active participants in their learning, particularly by providing multiple means of action and expression?
Yeah, so UDL is something that I came across in my teaching. And there was, if anyone's ever been a teacher, you know that we get these new, I don't want to call them buzzwords, but new concepts that are sort of introduced to us and they're really hammered home. And UDL is one that I really took to. I love the idea of, we talk about multiple modalities, the way people take in information, but also how they express information, right? And up to this point in time, a lot of people were really doing like status quo stuff. Like if it said to do a paper, you had to do a paper, or, it had to look like this. And one thing that I learned teaching special education is that there are lots of different ways to get to the same destination, right? We don't always take the same path as someone else. And that students can know things, but maybe they're not the best writer. So they prefer to, use their talents to make a song or to make a game or to create something. And allowing for that flexibility, one, helped me get to know my students really well and got to see all these different talents that I wouldn't know that they had I put them in that particular box. And it also allowed them to feel like their perspectives, their assets were valued in the classroom. So I think it goes a long way to creating a classroom culture where everyone feels like they're valued and important. And then for a lot of us, school can feel, or even out of school time, can feel like this sort of very structured, limiting space. And I think whenever we feel like we have a part in something, we have a choice, even if it's, hey, here's 3 assignments that you could do, choose which format, it feels good to be able to say, this is how I would like to present this information. This is how I would like to do it. And I think it makes people more engaged and more willing to do the work if they feel like it's something that's important to them, it's valuable to them, or that it aligns with their interests. And so UDL is something that not only we learn about in the course, but it's also something that we try to build into the course. So for the final project, there are actually 3 options. You can create a podcast, you can create an assignment, or you can do a traditional written paper. There's also space that if, people have other ideas, they can share that. And I'm always learning. And so, I take classes in the disability studies department. So part of that is me spying on them to see what they're doing and how they're formatting things so that I can bring it back over to the youth studies department and say, hey, here's some really good information I found out, or here's how things are formatted over there that really provides additional accessibility and allows everyone to contribute to the classroom in a way that feels meaningful to them.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
So I wanted to ask you, now that we're almost through the whole course, right? Congratulations. We're almost to the whole course. What feels most valuable to you as a youth worker or someone who, works at an org that services youth?
Yeah, with this course, I'm just so grateful that we get a deeper understanding of what disability is and understanding that it doesn't look the same everywhere. Working with or working indirectly with providers in the work that I do, this course is really able to help me be able to teach them, like, hey, listen, we don't have access to those IEPs. We may not have all the resources to support all the students, right? But how can we make, courses more accessible to all students, no matter what they are, what they're able to do and what they're able not to do, right? And so I really feel strongly that these courses, even if you're not in youth studies and you're just directly working with youth in general, teachers, paras, anyone working with youth, these courses really help us understand removing the deficit-based approach to working with youth and just really meeting the youth where they are. And I know that we talked about UDL, but also just having different ways to show that they're mastering the learning that they're having, right? And that they don't have to necessarily write a paper. They don't necessarily have to write an essay, right? We can do comic strips, we can do videos, podcasts, we can do TikToks, Instagram posts, right? Just to show that we are really implementing this, strategic way to make sure that all youth are included in a space and that they're not necessarily singled out. So these courses, we're almost done, which is shout out to all the students in our program. But these courses really change the way that we are facilitating the work that we do. It's changing the way that we are talking to our peers, and it also it really bolsters the way that we are doing the work on the ground.
I'm glad to hear that because I think sometimes what happens is disability feels like this big thing that people are like, I didn't go to school for that. I didn't get trained in that. I'm not sure how to touch that or what to do with that. And of course, it's a complex issue and there are so many things that you could learn forever and ever. But I think at the base of it is like humanity and respect and justice, right? Like, so how do we approach our youth work for respect for all of the learners and the youth that will be here? How do we promote equity and how do we promote justice? How do we show that we care? And so there are these foundational things, whether you have a degree in, disabilities and disability studies or special education or not, where we can say, I can do that. And I think it's important to give youth workers those tools that say, oh, I could do that. Or I already do that. I didn't know what to call it. I didn't know what to name it. I didn't know that was a theory or that was, all these sorts of things. But it's something that I can do because I believe in these principles of positive youth development. I believe in equity. I believe in justice. And so I do, part of the youth studies program is this real big focus on social justice work and equity work. And, learning about disability, incorporating accessibility, inclusivity, all these things, that is social justice work. That is equity work. that is important humanizing work. And we don't have to know the ins and outs of every single piece of that to be able
Mhm.
to approach youth with respect, with dignity, and in that strength-based approach. So I'm happy to hear that the course at least gave you some things where you're like, hey, I can do that.
Dropping gems every time we meet, every time.
All right. I appreciate you so much.
I appreciate you. Thank you.